President, I arise reluctantly to speak against the nomination of Harold Koh to be the legal advisor to the State Department. I had a chance to explain some of those yesterday, and for the benefit of our colleagues, I'd like to cover those and some additional concerns as well with a little more detail. There's no question that Dean Koh is a brilliant lawyer, and he has been a charming advocate for his promotion to this important position, but I've concluded that he is not the right person for this job because he has stated what I would consider to be radical views with regard to the role of the United States sovereignty relative to the rest of the world. For example, he has advocated judges using treaties and customary international law, including treaties that the United States Senate has not ratified, to bind the United States. If that's not an erosion of U.S. sovereignty, I don't know what it is. And advocating that judges who take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States should instead look to international treaties as the source of that law, to me, is a radical and very fundamental shift in what I think most people would expect from our judges. He said that federal judges should use their power to vertically enforce or domestic law with international norms and foreign law. Do we really want the top advisor at the State Department supporting the idea that international bodies and unelected federal officials, not the U.S. Congress, should be the ultimate lawmaking authority for the American people? I don't think so. Now, this has manifested itself in a number of ways. For example, in an interview that Dean Koh gave on May the 10th for the NewsHour, he said he was asked about, for example, some of the interrogations that took place in places like Guantanamo. And he basically said that the U.S. forces, including our commanders and presumably the intelligence officials that actually conducted interrogations and detentions, violated the Geneva Conventions and should be held accountable for that. Does he really believe that U.S. officials should be prosecuted and perhaps convicted of war crimes because they did what the American people asked them to do, consistent with legal opinions from the Office of Legal Counsel at the Justice Department? I think it, as the Wall Street Journal points out today, in an article called "The Pursuit of John Yoo," I'll just read a couple of sentences from it. Here's a political thought experiment, the article says. Imagine that terrorists stage an attack on U.S. soil in the next 4 years. In the recriminations afterward, administration officials are sued by families of victims for having advised in legal memos Guantanamo will be closed and that interrogations of al-Qaeda detainees be limited. Should these officials be personally liable for the advice they gave to President Obama? The article goes on to say, we would say no, but that's exactly the kind of lawsuit that the political left, including State Department nominee Harold Koh, has encouraged against Bush administration officials. And of course, it goes on to talk about the lawsuit brought by Jose Padilla, convicted terrorist, against lawyers at the Office of Legal Counsel, the Justice Department, that is being encouraged, if not facilitated, by Harold Koh, the outgoing dean of the Yale Law School, the person who is being proposed for promotion as a legal advisor at the Justice Department. I just think his views are, if they were confined to academia and to Yale Law School, it would be one thing. But the thought that he would then put these, what I would consider to be out of the mainstream legal theories and approaches into action as a legal advisor at the State Department, to me is a frightening prospect. He's also, in the course of his writings, taken very extreme views with regards to the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, part of our Bill of Rights, the right to keep and bear arms. In 2002, And later in Fordham Law Review in May 2003, he wrote an article called "The World Drowning in Guns," in which he argued for a global gun control regime. Do we really want the top advisor at the State Department working through diplomatic circles to take away America's Second Amendment right Constitution? I think not. Third, Professor Koh in 2007 argued that foreign fighters, detainees held by the United States Armed Forces anywhere in the world, not just at Guantanamo Bay, are entitled to habeas corpus review in U.S. federal courts, in civilian courts, just like an American citizen would be, no matter where they were held. Do we really want the top advisor at the State Department working to grant terrorists and enemy combatants more rights than they've ever had before under any court interpretation? I think not. Perhaps most timely, Professor Koh appears to draw moral equivalence between the Iranian regime's political suppression and human rights abuses that we've been watching play out on television and America's counterterrorism policies on the other hand. In 2007, he wrote, "The United States cannot stand on strong footing attacking Iran for illegal detentions when similar charges can be and have been lodged against our own government." Do we really want a legal advisor to the State Department who can't see the difference between America defending itself against terrorism and the brutal repression practiced by a theocratic dictatorship? I think not. Mr. President, I'm afraid that Dean Koh is just another in a line of radical nominees by this administration that the Senate should not confirm. I think back to Don Johnson, who was also nominated to the Office of Legal Counsel, who said America is not at war post 9/11, and that instead of embracing the provisions of the Constitution that recognize the President's powers as Commander-in-Chief to protect the American people, we ought to instead resort to a paradigm that says, well, this is really just a law enforcement matter. If it's a law enforcement matter, then you're not going to do anything to stop terrorist attacks before they occur. You're merely going to prosecute the terrorists after they kill innocent life. And just like Don Johnson, who said we're not at war, Harold Koh has encouraged and facilitated the investigation and perhaps prosecution of American military personnel, and who knows who else, including lawyers who've provided legal advice, as well as perhaps the intelligence officials that relied on that advice to get actionable intelligence that we've used to deter and indeed to defeat terrorist attacks on our own soil. So I hope my colleagues will join me in voting against cloture on this nomination. Professor Koh may be an appropriate individual for some other job, but when our national security is at stake, when our role relative to the international community, whether we're going to subject ourselves not just to the U.S. Constitution and laws made by the elected representatives of the people here in the Congress, but instead to international treaties and international common law that we have not agreed to, that the American people have not consented to, I think this is the wrong job for this nominee. And I would ask my colleagues to join me in voting against cloture. I yield the floor, and I reserve the balance for our time.